Greetings everyone. Today on the bench I have a speaker. So it is time for another speaker review. And this one is a Dayton Audio MK402 4-inch two-way bookshelf speaker. I would consider this a very small size speaker. It's not really a micro size speaker, but it is very small. I consider a very small speaker one with the dimensions on the longest side that is 10 inches or less, which is about 25 centimeters. And this one certainly qualifies because it is 9.5 inches tall. Dayton Audio makes pretty decent budget speakers. I did have the B652, which were about half the price of this, though I must say I heard some good things about them. I still really wasn't that impressed with them. For the money they were very good, but hoping these are better. To be honest, I'm not really a big fan of smaller speakers, at least for a main listening system. I like a larger size speaker in that case, but these certainly do have their place. Okay, taking a look at the cabinet here, they have this beveled design here, which is kind of a departure from their cheaper speakers that are just squared off. And they have the rounded design here to the grill. Let's see if I can get that off holding the camera in one hand while trying to remove the grill. There we go. I see one of the pins already came loose. I think it just needs some glue. These are plastic, so you want to be careful you don't shear them off if you bump the grill or something. But we have a 4-inch driver here. It's a long throw. You can see it has a very large surround relative to its size, and a soft dome tweeter. See if I can get any closer on that. You can see that. It's kind of got like a fabric pattern with a kind of a shiny coating over it. So yeah, I am a fan of dome type tweeters. I think they sound the best in my opinion. Now for the price of $60, if I didn't mention before, they sell for $70 and they were on sale for $60. So that, yeah, they are a very inexpensive budget speaker. So you're not going to get a lacquer piano finish or a wood veneer. You're just going to get this black vinyl covering. Though, you know, for the money they do have it applied very nicely. I don't see any, you know, issues with the application. On the back they give us these banana type terminals that you can also use regular wire by screwing them down. And they're not super high quality or anything, but you know, they get the job done. One special thing about this speaker is it actually uses a crossover. It's not like a lot of these cheaper speakers that, you know, they just connect the woofer directly and they use a single capacitor to the tweeter, and that's the crossover. But this is supposed to have an actual crossover, and we have a small port there. So let's take a closer look at the speaker. I'm going to remove the driver and take a peek inside. Okay, have the driver removed. You can see here it has pretty decent sized magnet, vented pole piece. This here is just the foam insulator that helps prevent air leaks. And looks like they went the extra mile here and put foam on the speaker wires. And if you can see inside there, get that out of the way, there's the crossover. Looks like it's a 4-element crossover, and they have the stuffing in there, and look at that, they actually have bracing I don't know if I can give you a better shot with the light or not. Yeah, they have braced this. And there's, I don't know, what do you call those, cleats or around the sides to firm up the cabinet. As for the tweeter, it's a neodymium magnet type. I'm not going to take that out, not much to see there. So really the construction of the speaker is actually surprisingly good for the money. Like I say, they went the extra mile and done some things better with this. Before we get on to the listening sample, here is the manual. They are pretty verbose about room placement and all that stuff. And here are the specifications. You have your driver complement, the rated 40 watts. I usually ignore the max thing and just use 40 watts. I also ignore that RMS figure. And just think of them as a 40 watt speaker. Impedance is 4 ohms. So you have to be careful with that because a lot of home theater type receivers will not properly handle 4 ohms. So you want to check the manual or the back of the unit, make sure you can use it with 4 ohm speakers before using these. Response is rated at 60 Hz to 20,000 Hz. Sensitivity is 84 dB 1 watt 1 meter. Well, that might seem like it's fairly insensitive, but that's par for the course with a small speaker that they're trying to balance, the response across the frequency band. So, hopefully they do sound pretty good when we listen to them. However, at such a sensitivity, it does take a lot of power to get a decent amount of sound out of them. And just more information about the speaker size. And okay, I have the speaker set up for a recording test here. Now I know it's not going to be a good representation when you record speakers like this. You pretty much hear the room they're in and all the modes and effects of being in a room. But, if I didn't do this, people would complain that I didn't give at least a music sample of them. So yeah, you have to take these with a grain of salt as to how the speakers really will sound. I do have the speakers back closer to the wall. They're not up against the wall. But when I tested these speakers here, which I'm using them as a stand now, but when I tested those in the other video, I had them more forward, and the recorder I was using was kind of in a mid-bass node in the room, where it was kind of mid-bass heavy, so it didn't really do them justice. So I moved them back here, which is better. And that's the thing. Positioning speakers is everything. Getting the sound the way you want it. So anyway, I will go ahead and proceed with some music samples. And at the end of the video, I will come back and give my opinions of these speakers after listening to them for about 4 hours in different rooms and different positions to see my overall opinion of these things.
Would you touch me? Hey you, with your ear against the wall, waiting for someone to call out, would you touch me? Hey you, would you help me to carry?
Okay, to wrap up my review on these speakers, what did I think of the sound? Well, the first thing that stood out to me is their ability to bring the bass. Now this is a really small speaker. I mean, my hand almost covers the front of the speaker. And, you know, small speakers are not really noted for bringing good bass, but these provided decent bass. Granted, it's not going to blow the roof off. I mean, these are fairly insensitive speakers. They're small speakers, but I was impressed with the amount of bass they brought. Playing some pure sine wave tones, I could start to hear the fundamental tone come in around 35 hertz and was strong at 38 hertz. And, you know, that's pretty low and impressive for such a small speaker. And it wasn't a one-note wonder either. It actually, you know, once that kicked in, you got bass throughout the spectrum on up. So I was pretty impressed with that. Another thing I noticed with these speakers, I put them in place where my Boston Acoustics A100s are. You know, of course, they're much larger speakers, and they're a very neutral speaker. Now, this speaker is somewhat colored in its sound. The one thing that stood out to me was a bass hump in the mid to upper bass region. And I notice that a lot with smaller speakers. They tend to have a hump in the bass that gives them kind of a boxy sound. Though these weren't terrible, it's definitely there. And it does depend on your listening position and speaker position in the room. At some listening positions, that hump was almost gone and the speaker sounded really good. But in other positions, it was definitely there. In what I call a neutral position, there's going to be that hump. It's just an artifact of the speaker. So, you know, it's not what I would say a neutral speaker. It definitely colors the sound a little bit. One thing these speakers need is power. 84 dB, 1 meter, 1 watt. They're not a very sensitive speaker. But, you know, again, that's par for the course for such a small speaker. It's going to take power. You have to be careful with that because let's say you have a amplifier that's rated 50 watts into 8 ohm loads, but it can handle 4 ohm loads, which these speakers are 4 ohm speakers. Well, you could actually be pushing a lot more power than you think you are into these speakers if you're cranking them up. So you have to be careful when you're using a more powerful amplifier. You know, the smaller drivers, they tend to sound stressed when you really forcing them to put out high SPLs. Another thing I noticed, the treble was a lot more clear if I had the grills removed. It's the first time I really noticed the grills making a big difference in the sound of a speaker. But in this case, taking off the grills, the treble had a little more clarity. So overall, what do I think of the speakers? For the price, they are quite amazing. I would certainly recommend them. You know, if you're just looking for a speaker for computer use, or you want a speaker that works in a smaller room with a smaller system, and you don't really want to crank it up, these speakers will work quite well, and I would recommend them for that. Now, the type of person who may want to look elsewhere is the audiophile, because of the coloration to the sound, which, you know, some people might like it, some people may not. It depends on the person. But, you know, somebody looking for a neutral sound may not like the coloration that these speakers give. So overall, for a speaker that costs $60 a pair, looking inside of them, they didn't cut corners to the lowest common denominator. They seem to go the extra mile. And the fact that they can put out decent bass, I think they are a very good speaker for the cost, and I would give them a highly recommended. So that's it for the review. Thanks for watching. Greetings everyone. Today on the bench I have a speaker. So it is time for another speaker review. And this one is a Dayton Audio MK402 4-inch two-way bookshelf speaker. I would consider this a very small size speaker. It's not really a micro size speaker, but it is very small. I consider a very small speaker one with the dimensions on the longest side that is 10 inches or less, which is about 25 centimeters. And this one certainly qualifies because it is 9.5 inches tall. Dayton Audio makes pretty decent budget speakers. I did have the B652, which were about half the price of this, though I must say I heard some good things about them. I still really wasn't that impressed with them. For the money they were very good, but hoping these are better. To be honest, I'm not really a big fan of smaller speakers, at least for a main listening system. I like a larger size speaker in that case, but these certainly do have their place. Okay.